On the screen, we are going to talk about our timeline, major revisions to our standards, our ESL hub, and the implementation of PD. And then we're going to give you an opportunity at the end to ask any questions or share any concerns you have. Stacy?
Thanks, Susan. So as Susan kind of mentioned earlier, today we'll be upholding our vision through discussing implementation of the ELD standards and working around coordinating our efforts to just really make sure that you're informed around everything standards related to get ready for implementation PD this coming spring, and then also for implementation next school year. So before we actually jump in, we want to really just take a moment to kind of bring everybody's voices to the table and thinking about how we can start connecting to the work ahead. So we'd just like for you, if you would take a moment to kind of reflect on this quote, and then just let us know in the chat what resonates with you. So the quote is, "Without standards, there can be no improvement." What resonates with you?
Are y'all going to put on your video?
So I see without no improvement, that the quest for improvement must be constant. Without a plan, it's like a duck hunt. You need to have an end goal in order to measure if you're growing, definitely. It's like taking a trip without a destination. Standards provide a plumb line, the gold standard, if you will. Definitely, Lanny. Glad you're with us today. Standards help us see what the improvement is. Standards guide improvement, goal setting. Parameters are important to guide our growth. Needing goals to grow, for sure. Reference we use to determine growth, continuous improvement, the expectations we should have in mind as we're in terms of where we want to take our students, for sure. You need to know how to improve. If we don't, we need somewhere to start from, definitely. Having standards provides a space where you begin and offers an opportunity for directions forward. Need steps or guides leading to the goal. Know where we are now to move forward. We need a place to compare so we know that we are improving and that we need to continue doing so. I love these, and thank you so much for sharing those in the chat. And please keep them coming. As you think of them, please put them in the chat. But I think what many of you kind of touched on is really just the importance of expectations and having a goal to work towards, right? And that's exactly what we'll be discussing today. So our new ELD standards, and then how we can all kind of work together to implement them to really improve the instruction and the opportunities that we provide for our ELs or our multilingual learners beginning in the 22-23 school year.
What?
So before we look at the standards themselves, we really just want to briefly remind you of the ELD standards installation timeline. As you may know, the State Board of Ed adopted the 2020 ELD Standard Course of Study for implementation for next school year. And this approval really marked the start of the installation phase, where our team, the ESL Title III team, is preparing for initial implementation of the ELD Standard Course of Study through planning PSU professional development, support, resource development. There are several things that we have planned for this winter, this spring, this summer around these very things, which is why we'd like to kind of keep you informed. So we actually have linked our installation timeline on this slide if you want to bookmark it or share it with colleagues if you haven't already. And as you can see, this January item is exactly what we're doing today, right? So we're fulfilling that commitment. And then in February, registration is actually going to open for implementation PD. So we'll share more about this professional learning opportunity in a little bit. But you may have seen our save the date, which we have been sharing for the past couple months. And then in the spring, more specifically March and April, we will have our implementation PD with PSUs to really provide technical assistance to make sure that you have what you need for successful implementation next school year. And then, of course, our annual Growing Success for ELD Summer Conference will be held this summer and focus on standards to really support and further support PSUs in their implementation for next school year. So now that we have an idea of our timeline for standards, let's go ahead and dig into the standards themselves. If you've had time to look through our newly adopted standard course of study, you'll notice that there have been quite a few revisions from the 2012 standards. So we're going to actually spend a good chunk of our time together looking at those major changes to the standards so you can start thinking about how you might want to start communicating those changes with your stakeholders and preparing them for implementation. And I believe Marshall is actually going to lead us through the high-level overview.
All right, welcome everyone. So as Stacy said, we're going to look at a high-level overview of the revisions first, and then we're going to follow that with a high-level overview with grade cluster specifics. I'm sure many of you have probably seen this slide here. This was part of what we'd have put out, and it shows you those high-level crosswalk between the 2012 and the 2020. And so one of the questions is, what major revisions do you notice? And so if you take a moment, if you want to mention anything that that you notice in the chat. Actually, I don't see the chat. Why is my chat not showing?
If it's not, I can pull some of the things for you, or I think Ivana's manning the chat too.
Yeah, for some reason mine's not popping up there.
So it looks like we've got, Marshall, some people are saying the modes of communication has expanded, interpretive and expressive language used in the new standards. 2020 is robust. L to ML, so multi-language learners.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What else? So we've got key language uses, a shift to specificity in the standards rather than previous broad overlay standards. Language expectations. Can-dos are being replaced by key language uses and proficiency level descriptors. So I think, Marshall, everybody kind of hit the nail on the head, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. One thing you'll see here is that we've highlighted in light blue, some of these major changes, and we're going to be looking at these a little bit more closely in the following slides. And so you'll have access to, obviously, the slide deck, and you'll be able to click on those to see where they're linked up to their examples. All right, so in the chat, we can share a link to our ELD Standards Hub, and we're going to invite you to explore. Of course, we have a document there that has the ELD Standard Course of Study, and so let me see, like I said, if someone could share that link in the chat, we're going to do that. This slide obviously shows the framework, and the framework consists of, the four components. So you have the ELD standards, the key language uses, the language expectations, and the proficiency level descriptors. These are all things that people mentioned just a minute ago. And we're going to go over these specifically, like I said, in the coming slides. And these components are like, the building blocks of language development, and they range from broad to narrow in scope. And they work together to make a comprehensive picture of language development. And that came from WIDA. The standards themselves have not changed, but this is a reminder that Standard 1 wraps around the other standards and should be integrated into them. So that was a nice, what do you call it? My mind has left me. Visual. There you go. I knew I'd figure it out eventually. All right, this next slide talks about the modes of communication. And so this is another major change that you saw on the previous slide. And they've added interpretive and expressive, which is what people mentioned before. And these modes of communication increase accessibility options for students, and they emphasize multimodal forms of communication. Of course, namely by adding viewing in conjunction with the listening and reading, and then adding representing in conjunction with speaking and writing. All right, so the next major revision is the addition of the key language uses. The key language uses describe prominent ways that language is used in school across all disciplines. When educators make choices about how to integrate content and language, the key language uses can help provide focus and coherence. The key language uses share some common aspects across disciplines, and yet each discipline also has unique ways of applying each. So what we see on this slide are brief definitions of each of these key language uses, which you see there: narrate, inform, explain, and argue. All right, that takes us to our next slide, which is the next major revision, and that is the language expectations. The language expectations set goals for content-driven language learning, and they are set up to look similar to the other content area standards. They add specificity to the ELD standard statements and the key language uses, and make visible the language associated with the content areas. So in the language expectations, the 4 individual language domains, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, are consolidated into the 2 more inclusive modes, which we talked about, interpretive and expressive. And we saw that on the previous slide. And so all the major revisions we've seen thus far can be seen in the nomenclature of each language expectation. All right, so we have the entire item, including the bullets, are the language expectation. And then in the nomenclature, you can see the grade level cluster. And then this is followed by the key language use. Right? And then the last we have is followed by the mode of communication. So we have 6.8, it's the grade level cluster, narrate, key language use, and interpretive is the mode of communication. All right. The next major revision is the proficiency level descriptors, which describe a continuum of language development for activities that target language expectations. They provide a detailed articulation of how students might develop language across the 6 levels of English language proficiency and are provided for each communication mode and each grade level cluster. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Stacy.
Thanks. So now that Marshall's kind of gone over just briefly the high level overview of the revisions, we want to take a little closer look at the grade level cluster. So in a moment, we're actually going to ask that you take some time to review the following slides, which contain the verbs from the skills in each grade level cluster. So if a new verb or skill appears in that grade level cluster, you will see it in bold. So in a minute, we're just going to give you some time to look at how the skills progress across the grade level clusters. Pay close attention to the new ones that are added in bold in each grade, and think about what you notice and how this might be different from our 2012 standard course of study. So again, we're going to give you a couple minutes now to explore the slides. You'll hear radio silence from us while you do that, and then we'll come back together to debrief. So the slides that you're looking at are slides 17 through 22. And again, as you look at slides 17 through 22, just think about what you notice and how this might be different from our 2012 standard course of study. And while you're looking at that, if you want to jot down some of your thoughts in the chat, you're more than welcome to do that. It looks like Reve has kind of started us off. So just a couple more minutes and then we'll come back together. All right, if you haven't already, feel free to go ahead and share your thoughts in the chat in terms of how you kind of see them progressing from grade to grade across those grade level clusters. So it looks like some of the things we have in the chat that people are noticing that there's a wider variety of verbs. Definitely, it's more robust and rigorous. They're asked to perform with higher or critical thinking skills. Definitely. Complexity increases with the next grade span. The new one has a greater focus on problem solving, analyzing, critical thinking. Can definitely see that. Tamara said a tighter correlation to content area standards, less dependent on teachers figuring out MPIs. I agree, more robust, more closely reflect core content, provide more opportunities for ELs to use language that entails higher level thinking skills. Definitely, you can certainly see that when they're being asked to then start pulling out evidence to kind of support their own opinions and their own ideas. Higher order, rigor, language is a lockstep with the progression of content skills across core disciplines. Will be very important for all content teachers to understand the variety of expectations for ELs. Yes, I think the level of expectation is there. I think that's awesome that all of our kids, all of our multi-language learners have access to that rigor. Blending of content area skills, specific and content, connect to content standards, critical higher order thinking, repetition of verbs across all grade levels and standards, definitely, so that they're building on what they learned in the previous grade, right? And it's getting more complex. Progress is more tangible and visible. Absolutely. So I'm glad that all of you kind of thought about those things and are noticing the increasing complexity across the grade level clusters. So really what we want to bring you to now is thinking about this question here. So we want to give you some time to discuss this. So in thinking about all of the revisions or the high level overview of the revisions that you've looked at, how might those revisions or progressions impact instruction? High level of rigor is expected. Content areas have progression/order in some cases. Increase in student ownership. Makes it much easier for the teacher to seamlessly blend content and language. Definitely, that is what ELs need, right? Clear objectives and goals for students. I think it also kind of provides our state, right, with a unified language when we're talking about our ELs. It'll be easier for classroom teachers to connect their content. Definitely, I agree with that, Simone. Indirect ELD instruction, ESL teachers have a firm standard course of study to follow, and in collaboration for content teachers supporting ELs. Yeah, for sure. It's a great tool. Scaffolding of skills, Instruction should definitely become more targeted, and I would even say more intentional instructional planning. Better alignment, if teachers can take the time to learn, understand, etc., academic language acquisition will take place in a more relaxed and accelerated rate, definitely. Cohesive, higher order thinking, it definitely makes it real. Pathway to actual all day long language support for ELs, absolutely. So keep those coming. Thank you so much for sharing. Those are really great insights. So now that we've kind of gone over the major revisions and looked at some grade level cluster specifics, we want to spend a little bit of time now digging into the resources that we currently have available and the resources that will be available to support implementation of these new standards and their revisions. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Sat Lee right now, who's going to walk us through these resources and where to find them.
Thank you, Stacy. And we can click on the slide to go to the hub. That would be awesome. So last semester, as Stacy was mentioning, the ESL Title III team designed a Canvas hub to house all the resources supporting stakeholders during the implementation of the ELD Standards course of study starting next school year 2022-2023. When you access, you might have a notification from the system saying that you need to log in, but there is no login required. This notification may be ignored or closed since it won't change any of the access to the actual materials. However, if you want to log in, you may have to enter your NC Cloud login credentials, which are your 10-digit number and password, the same that you use to access Power School, Power Teacher, NICES, and all those other platforms in NC Ed Cloud. So the short URL we're going to share, and we have been sharing, now we corrected it. Thank you, Ivana, who's our chat manager today. We have this short URL for you to go and explore. When we release this, I'm sure most of you have been able to go and look. We have some icons, and you can see on the screen. These icons will help all visitors navigate the resources and then see what we have. So we have our main document, the NCELD Standards Course of Study, that has been aligned to what we do in North Carolina and what we expect moving forward. So you might be familiar with the WIDA document, but we have adapted that document and made all the citations and information so you can see the correlation between these two documents. And then it's more similar to what teachers are used in the state. So then it's easier when you have those conversations with them and you mentioned this is what we're doing, this is what we have at the state, and it's not an additional website like going through WIDA to see, although we are using all those materials as well. So thank you. I see in the slide that we have opened the document. It's available. You can go through the document. You see some specifics. And as I said, it's aligned to what we want in North Carolina moving forward. So we're really excited to have this document because it feels now that it's our document in the state and that we are going to be able to make those connections we have always fight for at the content area. So we can go back. Thank you. And all the pages, this is very easy to navigate. You can always return to the home and look at the different resources. This is another resource that is currently available, is the glossary. Okay, so we have some terms and we have shared in other webinars, if you have been able to participate, that this is a living document. So if you see there are terms that we missed or some that are very specific to your district and you think that we could include those and adapt our definitions, please just send us an email. And we have a team working on this, reviewing the glossary and making sure that we have everything up to date and that you have access to these documents as well. And because these are documents that we update live, then you will always have the most recent versions. You will need to worry about, I downloaded this version and now I need the most recent one. You will always have in this hub those updates and you will be able to access all that. And again, we are open to suggestions. If you find something, we already adapted a few terms because we have some districts that say this is what we're using, and then how can we adapt and make those changes. So we are doing that. And then we have other resources that we are working on. We have the crosswalk, unpacking, mapping, and parent caregiver guide. In the next slides, my colleagues will talk about them and give you a brief information about it. Okay. And this slide is, again, the icon, so you know that this is a one-stop shop that you're going to find everything. And also, if you have, we have a very special icon, the ELD Standards Resources. If you want to go there, Stacy, for a minute before we leave the hub, I would love to bring your attention to this because we have every month we are releasing some updates, and we have all the archives for these updates on this page. So if you have missed one, then you have all the information there and you can access and also share and use it in your communication with your school teams and other people in your school community. And we also have the first standard-related resource that we started working on, and it's our ELD Standards ELD Coffee Chats. If you couldn't participate, you will see here the video recordings, the Google Slides, and you are welcome to adapt this, use it, go through the different modules, and use all that information. And this is also based on one of the self-paced WIDA workshops. So if you're working on that with your teams, then you can complete and go and review the coffee chats and get more ideas and information on how to implement this in your districts and help everybody understand how the ELD standards have changed and how they are impacting our students' academic success. So I think I finished now. I'm going to add our email just so you have it. And if you have any suggestions, if you have some ELD standards related resources you want to share, please send it to us. And we might have a link there so we can see what is happening statewide. And these are the current documents we have. We already navigated a little bit through those. So please just go and explore. And now I'm going to turn it back. I'm not sure who's going to start. Crosswalk. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Marshall so he can talk about this upcoming resource.
All right. Thank you, Sally. So to successfully implement the standards, we're in the process of creating a crosswalk document to build a connection between the 2012 NC ELD Standard Course of Study and the adopted 2020 ELD Standard Course of Study. And the purpose of this crosswalk is going to be to illustrate the variance between the two, right? So between the 2012 and the 2020. Supporting, thereby supporting the transfer to, our adopted 2020 ELD Standard Course of Study. The crosswalk document is going to follow the grade band structure that we see in the new 2020. So you're going to have kindergarten, first, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. And then the parts that you see are going to be followed by two main sections. And it's going to be, covering the standards framework and then the K-12 performance definitions. And so this document, like Sally was saying before, is going to be providing, it's going to be a resource to provide you with information, and in this case, just, a high-level overview of what we're looking at between the 2012 and the 2020.
One thing that I do want to add to that too, Marshall, is just, this crosswalk will be, I think, instrumental in helping any revisions or adaptations that needs to happen to any curriculum or any instruction that's being provided. So that can kind of guide your review of any of those materials that may need revision to make sure that they're aligning with our new standard course of study and its language expectations.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so now we're moving on to unpacking.
Thank you, Marshall. I have had the privilege of working with some wonderful leaders across the state and Stacy to create our unpacking documents. Hopefully that I'm really looking forward to when we can fully share these documents with you. But the purpose of these documents, as you can see on the screen, is to increase student achievement by really providing access to the standards, grade level content, just to ensure that we have a clear understanding of the expectations of the new standards. As you can see in the graphic, the unpacking documents will include the standard with a clarification, unpacked language function, in the classroom ideas, and then a sample language objective for each bullet that within that language expectation. So I think, sorry, I'm having a difficult time seeing the screen, but I think you will see that these will help us, help the content teachers as well as the ESL teachers connect to the content, connect to the standard to the content. What am I missing, Stacy?
Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. But yeah, I mean, Susan hit it right on. I think this unpacking document is low-key going to be the best in our division. I think it's super comprehensive. And I would say that there are plenty of people on this call who have been working on these documents and working really, really hard on them.
Really hard,
like
yes.
Tamara, and we've got Lanny with us. We might have other people with us. I couldn't really see the participant list, but these documents are comprehensive. I think that they're going to be very helpful for not just our ESL educators, but really all teachers of ELD and multi-language learners, right? So they're going to be able to kind of use this document, get ideas, see what sample language objectives look like that integrate content and language. And we hope that this is kind of gonna give us I guess maybe the what is it, the same sheet of music to sing from, just to kind of give everybody ideas of what rigorous instruction looks like for our ELs.
I'm really excited to release these to the whole state because I think everyone will love them.
Oh, and I will say too that they will be available by grade level cluster. So this is just a snippet, of course, of something from 4-5, but they will be available for each grade level cluster. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ivana, who's going to talk a little bit about the mapping document.
Good morning, everybody. So we are excited about the mapping document. I do have two screens, so I apologize if I'm looking to the side. The mapping document is designed to show the relationship between the ELD language expectations for all 5 of the ELD standards to show how they relate to the content areas of English language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. So we know that Standard 1, Social and Instructional Language, is woven throughout all of the content areas. And so we'll be addressing that in the mapping document, and especially in our professional learning once we are able to create that to support it. Also want to think about how Standard 1 can be used in other content areas other than those 4. So we are working on an exciting project with arts education to look at how we can look at relationships between the social and instructional language and the work that they do in arts education. So if you've had a chance to look at the language expectations, the ELD language expectations are set up to look more like the content standards that our teachers are used to seeing. And so this mapping document can be used for our ESL teachers to help coordinate with their content teachers and show them where the language can fit in, but it can also be used in the opposite direction with the content teachers really being able to explore the use of language to support the needs of their English language learners. So we're very excited about the mapping document. We're excited about looking at how it can be applied to lesson planning, how it can be applied to co-teaching, and so many of the other things that we do. So we really are excited about the mapping document. You see on the screen an example from English language arts. So you can see there, let me flip over to my other screen so I can see it a little bit closer. You can see there that on the left side, you have the language expectations, which Marshall talked about earlier. That's sort of that dot nomenclature with the ELD, the language arts. This one particular one is kindergarten, narrative, and interpretive. So it tells us what we're working on specifically in the language. Then it breaks it down a little bit further, as you see on the left side. So the first example is with the interpret language arts narratives with prompting and support by identifying key details. And then over on the right side, what we've done in this project is look at the standards. So again, in this one, kindergarten, and looked at the standard and said, okay, RL.K.1 is something that really coordinates well and is supported by the ELD standard language expectation. So here it's with prompting and support, ask and answer questions about key details in the text. So we're excited to release this document and then to really drill down into, if I'm an ELA teacher, if I'm an ESL teacher, how can we collaborate with this document? How can we strengthen the supports for our English language learners by having this mapping document in hand? And so this does go from kindergarten all the way through the specific content area courses at the high school level. Anything I missed?
I think you covered it. Just excited about this document for sure. And again, we'll have it for each major content area. So remind me, Ivana, we've got one for language arts, we've got one for math, we've got one for science, and one for social studies for each of the standards, right?
Right. And then we have the arts education that we're working on specifically with standard 1.
Right, which is like a bonus, which is awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I think Setley's going to talk to us a little bit about the parent caregiver guide.
Okay, can you hear me? Stacy?
We can hear you.
Okay, awesome. My WebEx is acting up. Okay, so this is another resource that we are creating. We have 2 amazing educators working on this resource, and more people is going to start reviewing. And the goal of this resource is to help parents and caregivers understand what does it mean to be an English learner, and then how to navigate through the language development standards and how they can support in their homes. So this document will respond to 3 main questions. How is my child identified as an English learner? What does my child learn in the ESL class? And what are those services that my child is receiving as an English learner? And how may I help my child at home? So this guide is going to be organized in 3 main sections. And the first one will be that part of identification. The idea for us is to have an overview. So you and your district can use this guide and add all the information, those specifics to your district. If you have a welcome center, then you can add that information. If you are a small district or a charter school, then you can still adapt this resource. But then this is a general overview, what is expected from the schools at the state level, at the federal level, and then what you are doing and adding all those resources and processes that you have in place already in your districts. And we are looking at having this resource with some graphics to help parents don't get lost in all the legislation and policies, but really understand what is it, what does it mean that my child is receiving these services and how they can support. And then brief information from the other resources. The beauty of this document and this is when it's going to have information from the other resources that we have shared before, the crosswalk, the mapping and unpacking, very brief so parents can see in a nutshell what is it that their kids are learning and what they can also ask if they want to go and ask during those meetings with parents in the schools. And then finally, some at-home learning activities so they can support language development. And we say language development, meaning they can also have some information to support their first language if they do not speak English. But we know that they need to understand that speaking their first language at home is also valuable and that they need to nurture that as well as they help them develop English at home. So we're really excited about this. We're working on this resource, and we hope that it's not too general, but it gives you a good starting point if you are just developing resources like this, or it can complement what you are creating or what you already have in your districts.
So Zachary, we do have a question. Will you be providing translations in some of our most common first languages for us to use?
Yes. So initially, we have divided in different states. Once we have the English version, the goal is translated into our top languages, and we're going to start with Spanish. That the first release, we're going to have those two languages, and then based on need, we're going to see if we can continue translating into the other languages. We had this discussion, and we said Spanish, since it's the top language, would be our initial release, and that will help districts, because then we know that your largest population is Spanish, but then you have others, but you know specifically which are those, and those change so much across the state that then you can have that, and then you already have the Spanish version. So yes, we're going to have for sure Spanish, and then based on need, we're going to review and see if we can provide any other languages, or as you start translating the document or complementing with your own resources at the district level, then you can share, and we can house all that in the ELD Standard Hub. So then it's available for everybody.
Thank you, Setley.
Okay.
So we have gone over quite a bit. We've given you a sneak peek of the resources that we really hope are going to assist with PSU implementation. During this time, we really want to give you a good chunk of time for an opportunity to discuss the questions that you see here in breakout rooms with other colleagues from across the state. So in a minute, you'll be sent to a breakout room to discuss how might these resources inform your support of ESL instruction, and what implementation work has already begun in your PSU. And if it hasn't, what ideas are kind of coming up for you. Again, this is just a time for you to kind of network, bounce ideas off of other people, and hear what is being done in some of the other districts and other regions of the state. So just give us 1 minute, and we're gonna send you into a breakout room. For those of you who are still in the main meeting, just make sure that you accept WebEx's notification to go into a breakout room so you can start discussing with others.
And if you have other windows open, sometimes the pop-up will hide under those other windows. So just minimize or close out of the other windows, and you should find that box.
So I apologize if I mispronounce anybody's names, but just make sure that you go ahead and accept WebEx's invitation to go into a breakout session. So that would include Dahlia, Dia, Donna, Elsa, Ian, Jill, Julie, Katie, Marcita, Martha, Nancy, Oscar, Robin, Shaniqua, Sharon, Sylvia, Susan, Tasha, Tracy, and then we've got a few that I'm not really sure if that's their name or if that's just an abbreviation, but just make sure that you're accepting that invitation to the breakout room. I do see a couple ideas in the chat. So Daniel said we discussed the clear benefits of more streamlined standards and will be easier to communicate and guide instruction for sure. I love that, especially for any coaches or ESL educators that are working to collaborate with other content area teachers too. Tamara mentioned, I'd love to see a DPI published collaboration protocol for including ESL teacher voices in content area and grade level planning. That's an awesome idea for a resource. We might have to steal that, so thank you. We all agree the resources will serve as a guiding foundation for ESL instruction as well as instruction in general, for sure. A collaboration protocol would be great, so a lot of people are excited about that. That's a great idea. Does anybody else want to unmute and share anything that stuck with them before we move on?
We had a question in session 6. This is Deborah Wilkes in Cumberland County. A question was about the different documents that DPI is sharing with us, if there will be hard copies that districts can purchase or will be shared with districts.
That's really a great question. That's something that we'd have to discuss with leadership to approve, obviously, of course. I do know that other areas for sure have worked with our publications division in developing hard copies that could probably be purchased for, just the amount of money that it takes to just print the copies. But that's something that's still under discussion at this point. But that's definitely something we can bring back to leadership to discuss. So thank you. Anything else?
Ivana shared with our group a condensed version of the standards, but I've tried putting in the link and I must not have written it down correctly. If she could share that again, that'd be great.
Sure. Ivana, is she talking about the standard course of study document?
Yes. I showed them the hub. You might want to even pull it up now. I'll put it in the chat. The first time we put it in the chat, there was a letter that was not capitalized. So if you wrote it down with the S in standards as lowercase, which is what the original link was written, it's not going to work. So it has to have the S capital and the H capital, standards and hub. I just put it in the thing again. Did you want me to pull that up, or did you want to pull that up, Stacy?
I think it's okay. You put the link to the hub in the chat, and then I just followed it up with the direct link to the page where that document that Ivana showed you. Anything else before we go ahead and move on and talk about implementation PD? All right. Well, if anything comes up, again, feel free to put that in the chat. Yes, Betsy, that's exactly the document that Ivana just shared. And we can put the link in the chat for you again. No problem. So we're going to go ahead and talk about implementation PD. So the resources that we kind of gave you a sneak peek on just a minute ago will be available for our implementation PD, like fully available. And Ivana's going to tell you a little bit more about what we're going to be doing with these documents in that PD.
Right, are you going to show the PowerPoint again?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I was under the impression it was already doing that.
No.
My fault. Here we go. Can you see it now?
It's coming. We do have a question in the chat box. It says, we are excited that the unpacking will help us have ideas of how to implement in the classroom.
Definitely. And Laura is also assisting us with writing, so kudos to her. And Lori's with us too, I see. They're all working on these documents. They've been working really, really hard.
And on my screen,
And doing a great job.
Sorry. On my screen, it still says you're starting to share content. I don't know if other people can see it or not.
I can see it.
Okay, well, I have my own copy, so I can just start then. So we are excited to have shared with you those documents and now to talk about the implementation PD that we have set up for you. So if you are on the next slide with the save the dates, again, I can't see it, but for the save the dates, we do want to share with you several dates that we have set aside to do this professional learning. And if you see on the slide, along with those dates, we are suggesting, strongly suggesting, that groups come based on the number of English learners you have in your PSU. And that's because we've heard from you guys in the past that if you're a very large district meeting with a very small district, that often the questions can be very different. And then some people feel like they're not getting their needs met to really drill down to what their needs are. So we are suggesting that if you have under 50 Ls, that you're looking at March 21st or 23rd, 50 to 99, 25th or 28th of March, 100 to 499, March 29th or 30th. And then if you have over 500 Ls, looking at April 1st. And we're not fooling you about that. We promise we'll have a real training. It is not absolutely required. So if the dates that fit your numbers absolutely don't work for you, you certainly can pick another set of dates. But again, we did set it up this way based on feedback we've received from you guys over the years. There is a question here. Is there another date from Deborah Wilkes? Is there another date for April 1st? We have roundtables that day. So Stacy, that would be something to look at. I think these dates are pretty much set at this point.
Yes, and I mean, we understand that obviously not all of those particular dates are going to work for you. So if April 1st is not necessarily going to work, then we do suggest that maybe you attend one of the other dates, and probably the one that probably would fit you best would be those March 29th or 30th dates.
Thank you, Stacy. So as you can see there, it's an all-day training. We'll meet from 9 to 11. We'll take a 2-hour lunch. That'll give you a chance to actually eat your lunch, make a few phone calls, whatever you need to do, and then come back together between 1 and 3. I see that someone has the question already. Can we attend individually if a team cannot be put together? We, again, strongly recommend that the team come together. I also see a question about the team being split up and attend different days. So you can see on the slide that we are recommending that you have an EL coordinator, an instructional coach, a content teacher and an ESL teacher, an administrator, and a parent liaison from your PSU. So we know with small PSUs, or especially with our charters, that it might be hard to have all of those people. But, you know, we've done these kinds of trainings in the past where we work at the PSU level, and then the PSU is in charge of putting that together and then disseminating it to the full PSU. So by having all of those people at the table, it really allows you to get the input as you're moving into your implementation plan, to get your input from those that are in the classroom, from those that are going to be supporting at the administration level, from those that are parents. So we do strongly encourage that you have that full team. I'm hearing a lot of background noise. If you guys could check your muting. But we do strongly encourage you to have that whole team. Stacy, what are your feelings about a team splitting up because it's too many people out at one time, splitting up and coming to different sessions?
I was going to speak on that, so thank you. We completely understand. Obviously, you know, you can only do what you can. If you need to split up, then that's, you know, obviously that's your choice to do that. The only reason why we really strongly suggest that you have some sort of team, whether, you know, it's a group of 3 or 2 people, whatever it may be, is because we are going to provide you some guidance around what to think about for implementation in your PSU. And we are planning on giving you some time to start that planning. And that may be difficult if you don't have all of the voices at the table that need to be there. I do see another question in the chat about it. It will be virtual.
And then we also have people already eager to register.
Yes, and that registration is going to be sent later in February.
Great. So if we go to the next slide with what to expect, several different things to expect. One is a deeper dive. We had the opportunity today to talk about each of the different resources. You had time in your breakout session to go a little bit deeper, thinking about what you might do with it. But this training will give us that time. And again, this is where having that team is very important. Will give us time to go deeper into it. What is it? What's it all about? And then looking at implementation tips. What are some ways that you can use it? But also you, just like you did in the breakouts today, giving each other ideas. I heard someone go, oh my gosh, it's a great idea. I'm going to steal it. So it's a wonderful time for us to synergize as we're all learning these new materials together. And then as Stacy mentioned, oh, she said the slide hasn't changed. Stacy, on what to expect?
Yep, I'm sorry. That was my bad. It's good now.
I can't see it. So deep dive, and then implementation tips, and then the planning time. Really valuable time for you guys to be able to be together and work and have us available to ask us questions, for us to be able to pop in and out and hear from you and learn from you as well. So again, we strongly encourage putting together those teams. We know you have to work within the parameters you have. We strongly encourage those dates just because we'll be able to answer specific questions that meet the group size better that way. And one of the questions that we've heard in the past when we're doing these trainings at the PSU level is, you know, what support are we going to have to help us kind of bring it down into our districts? And so I think Stacy's going to do our next slide about the summer conference that's also going to be focusing on our standards.
Yes, so to kind of extend the support that we're providing around the standards and implementation, our summer conference is going to be focused on standards, and a lot of that PD is going to be focused on those particular audiences that you see there under the pathways. So we do have sessions that are strictly around the documents that we'll be sharing during implementation PD, but more around how to maybe use them for instruction or how to use them to inform your program quality, things like that.
Perfect.
And then what we again, those pathways are strongly suggested, but of course they're going to be flexible. So if you do have a particular session that you want to attend that's available for another pathway, you certainly can. A lot of the different sessions are going to mirror one another, except they are going to be tailored for that specific pathway. So that's just something to consider as well. And then Susan is also going to be offering a pathway for data managers, which is going to be awesome. And then we'll end each day of that summer conference with just a quick office hours. And that's just really kind of a follow-up to the day's sessions that were offered. And that way you can kind of ask questions of the presenters. You can network with other people that maybe you met in your other sessions, and really just kind of use that time to extend your learning from the day's sessions. I do see questions about, is it going to be in person or virtual? It is going to be virtual. Most of that decision really came around, just in observing everything with COVID numbers. And we hated to have to plan something face-to-face and then being told that we had to rearrange it last minute if anything changed. So we just want to make sure that it's consistent. And then, of course, that the recordings will be available for anyone who wants to look at the sessions later on. And again, the registration for this is going to be available after implementation PD. So keep in mind, the first registration that'll go out will be in February for implementation PD, and then a couple months after that, you'll start to see things come out about the summer conference and how to register.
I just noticed that they said about budget purposes. If you guys would email us and just let us know how that impacts your budgets, that would be great. And they asked for a repeat on the registration.
So registration, we haven't decided on the exact date that we'll open that up, but that will not be until after implementation PD in March and April. So probably sometime at the end of April and beginning of May. So if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And of course, we'll address them as we can. It is free. Am I right, Ivana, since we're doing it virtual?
Yes, and I believe we're looking at not restricting the number of people, but we're still working out all of our final details. The next question was, will it be all week?
Yes, it is 5 days. Depending on the pathway, you may only have 4 days. But again, we're still kind of working those logistics out, but I would plan for 5 days, yes.
And when you say plan for 5 days, if I'm an ESL teacher, how many hours am I looking at each day?
It'd probably be anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. And if they decide to attend office hours, then again, that would be another hour. So depending on their level of attendance, it would be anywhere from 1.5 hours to 3 hours a day.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on. So I know we've shared quite a bit of information with you today. But before we end our time together, we just want to give you an opportunity to just reflect on everything that we shared today and maybe some of the things that you've heard. So in thinking about the revisions to the standard course of study, the resources that we shared, those sneak peeks, professional learning opportunities that you heard that are going to be available, what is going to be your first next step with your stakeholders in your PSU? So think about how might you begin communicating or implementing anything that we discussed today with your stakeholders. So just let us know in the chat. Presenting to principals this month as a preview, definitely. Identifying team members, asking for volunteers. Using the slides with the verbs. And again, this slide deck and the recording of it is going to be available to you soon after this week, most likely. So you are free to use those as you need them. Planning to present PD regarding the new ELD standards to the joint instructional group, great. identifying team members, creating example lessons for teachers with ELD students in their classroom for each content area. That's awesome. Continuing to talk about the standards, having ESL teachers discuss a monthly ESL PLCs, encouraging them to attend the summer conference. Great. Weekly newsletters, continuing monthly PDs, a spinoff of the coffee chats. That's great. Dig deeper into the resources. Definitely. Communicating this information with leadership. That's awesome, Alicia. I love that. Of course. We're glad that you had time to do that. Add the information in the in-house PD that you do with teachers in schools. Great. All right. Well, definitely keep those next steps coming. If you don't want to share them in the chat, that's completely fine. You may already be thinking in your head about how you want to proceed after you leave this time with us today. But at this point, we kind of just want to leave it open for you to address any questions you have. If you don't have any questions, you're obviously free to leave. We'll give you back 25 minutes of your time back. But we'll stick around for a little bit in case you have any questions. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. We know you're super busy, and it really means a lot that you took time out of your day to do this. So thank you.
We do have two questions. One is about the summer conference. Will the sessions be recorded because there's a summer camp going on, so the teachers in that particular PSU will not be able to attend?
Yes, sessions will be recorded, so they will be available afterwards.
Okay, and then you mentioned that they'll be able to access this recording. They're wanting to know where.
I don't know. We haven't worked that out yet. Probably the best place to put this would be in our hub. So probably where the coffee chats are, you'll probably find this. But we'll be sure to give more guidance as to where to find it for sure. And then just keep in mind too, we do send a monthly standard course of study update every month, every first Tuesday of the month, in case you haven't been, following that. And we'll be sharing this recording and the slide deck again in that update in case you want to share that with anybody in your district and school.
Awesome. We're getting lots of thank yous. This was amazing. We appreciate you. We appreciate you guys too. Thank you so much. Should we stop the recording at this point?
Yeah, that'd be great.